Hello everybody and welcome back. In this lecture we'll look at comprehension. There are various kinds of comprehensions like list comprehension, dictionary comprehension, and so on. We'll look at some of these comprehensions. And comprehensions are important because they can reduce the number of codes that we write. We'll see some examples of how to do these comprehensions. Let's start by looking at list comprehensions. I'll start by creating a list of numbers and I'll save it in a variable called list1. Let's say this list has the following numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'll create an empty list and then save it in a variable called cubes. So what we can do is, let's run those. We can use a for loop to go through each of these elements and then calculate the cube of each element and append it to our empty cubes list. So we can say for our numbers in our list1 object, we can say cubes dot append numbers cubed, numbers to the power of 3. Now if we call our cubes object, we have a list containing the numbers cubed. We can rewrite this by using list comprehensions as follow. So when we write list comprehensions, everything is enclosed in rectangular. When we write comprehensions, everything is enclosed in rectangular brackets. And we can say what we want to calculate. For instance, we can say numbers cubed for each of the numbers in our list1 object, and run it. We get the same result. You see how easy it is? In one line of code using list comprehension, we got the cube of each of the numbers. So here we can use any variable. I just used numbers, but you can say I or X, whatever you want. But for the numbers cubed for each of the numbers in list1. Let's look at another example. Let's create an empty variable called square root, an empty list. And what we'll do next is find out the square root of each of the numbers in our list1. Or if we want, we can create another list. For now, let's just use the same list object. So we can say for each of the number in our list1 object, we can say square root that append each of the numbers times to the power of 0.5. So that will give us the square root. Now if we call our square root object empty list, we get the square root of each of the numbers. And we can rewrite this using list comprehensions. We can say, so rectangular bracket, our number to the power of 0.5. So each of the numbers for number in our list1 object. We got the same result. Let's see some more examples. Let's create another list and save it in a variable called list2. And let's say this list has the elements -2, -4, -5, -8, 3 and 5. And let's create another list called an empty list called ABSV for absolute value. And we can start with an empty list, and we can use a for loop to calculate the absolute value of each of these numbers. For instance, we can say for numbers, now instead of numbers, I will just say I or X. Let's use X. For X in our list 2, we can say ABSV dot append absolute value of what? Our element X, each of the individual elements. And then if we call our absolute value object, we get 2, 4, 5, 8, 3, and 5, which is the absolute value of each of these numbers. And we could have done the same thing by using list comprehension. We can say ABS. So we start by creating rectangular brackets and say ABS of X for X in our list 2 object. List 2. We get the same result, 2, 4, 5, 8, 3, 5. And we can save this in a variable. Let's say ABSV. We can do that. And if we call our ABSV object, we have the absolute value. And we can do the same to all of these list comprehensions. We can save this to a variable and then call that variable. Same thing for the square root method here. Let's see another example. I'll call my list 2 object. So my list 2 object has the elements -2, -4, -5, 8, 3, and 5. What we can do is we can use a for loop, and then we can say if the number is negative, we can calculate the absolute value, and if the number is positive, we can calculate the cube of that number. We can do that also. Let's create an empty list and save it in a variable called pose. This is just an empty variable. So what we will do is for each of the numbers, let's say X, for each of the numbers X in our list 2 object, we can say if X is less than 0, so if it's a negative number, what do we want to do? We want to take our empty list and then call the append method. And what do we want to append? We want to calculate the absolute value of that number. So we can say absolute value of X. So this is the first statement. And for our else statement, we can say else. That means if the number is positive, we want to calculate the cube of that number. We can say pose, which is our empty list, that append. What do you want to append? X cubed, the number cubed, right? So if we run this and then call our pose object, so we see that for the first 4 numbers we have the absolute value, since those numbers are less than 0, and for the positive numbers we have the number cubed. 3 cubed is 27 and 5 cubed is 125, right? Now let's use list comprehension to get the same result. So we start by creating a rectangular bracket, and we can say x cubed, right? X cubed if x is greater than 0, or we can start with the other method, absolute value. So we can say absolute value of x, just to excuse me, just to be consistent with the method here. So absolute value of x if x is less than 0, that's the first method. Else, now we use the second method, x cubed, right? So we have our first if condition, our second if condition, and then our for loop statement for x in our list 2 object. So this will do the same. If we run it, we get the same result, right? 2, 4, 5, 8, 27, and 125. What if I want to do 3 if else conditions? What can we do it? Let's see an example. We'll create a list object called list3, and then it will have the elements, let's say -2, -3, -4, and a few positive numbers, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what we'll do in this case is, let's say if the number is negative, we'll calculate the absolute value. If the number is positive, and let's say if the number modulus 2 is 0, we can calculate, let's say, the square root of that number. And if the number modulus 2 is not equal to 0, we can calculate the cube root or something like that. Let's see an example. So we can say for our number in list 3, for each of the numbers in our list 3, if our number is less than 0, we want to calculate the absolute value of it, right? So we will take our both empty list, or for this case, let's create another empty list. Let's call it 3 methods. 3 methods, and we'll set it to be an empty list. Okay. So for numbers, for each of the numbers in our list 3 object, if the number is negative, take the 3 methods empty list and then append to it the absolute value of the number. That's one condition. If number modulus 2 double equal to 0, what do you want to do? We want to take the 3 methods empty list and append to it, what do we want? The square root of the number, right? So you can say the number to the power of 0.5. Or you could simply import the math module and then use the square root method. You can do that also, but I'll just stick to number times 0.5. Else, we can say take the 3 methods empty list and append to it. What do you want to append? Maybe the number cubed or anything that you like. So number cubed, we can do that. Run it. Name number is not defined. Oh, here it's number, not num. So number modulus 2. Let's run it again. Now if we call our three methods object or empty list, it will have these conditions. Let's call it again. Okay, so we have our list 3 object. So the first 3 elements are negative, so here we have their absolute value, and then the next 3 elements we have 1.4, the square root of 2. 3 is an odd number, so it's cubed, and then the square root of 4 is 2.0, 5 cubed, and then the square root of 6, which is 2.449. Now let's use list comprehension like this to find out the same exact result. So we started with absolute value and then square root and then number cubed. So we can say first we have our rectangular bracket and then absolute value of our number if our number is less than 0, if number squared to the power of 0.5, square root of the number, if the number modulus, if number modulus 2 is equal to 0, right? Else we have what? The cube root of the number cubed for each of the number in our list 3 object. What do you think I'll get if I run this? Do you think we'll get an error or this will be successful? Let's run it and find out. We get an error. That's because list comprehensions cannot take more than 2 conditions. This is why we get an error, and I wanted to show you the limitations of list comprehension. So list comprehensions are not the solution all the time. Okay? If we have more than 2 conditions, we cannot use list comprehensions. We'll have to rely on our for loop and other methods in this case. Okay? Because we cannot have, here we have 3 conditions. So in this case, we cannot use list comprehensions. I wanted to quickly show you that list comprehensions have some limitations. But for a couple of conditions, it's a really good method. Great. And in the next lecture, we'll see comprehensions on other objects like dictionaries and sets. And we'll see how we can use list comprehensions with the map and filter methods. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.